Keegan Murray drafted number 4 overall, the highest pick ever in the history of Iowa men's basketball. What is the impact for Fran McCaffery and Iowa hoops? We'll get to that in a moment, but first, I want to tell you about Josue Alvarez down at Dewey Ford in Ankeny. That's Josue Alvarez at Dewey Ford. Do he treat you better? He do. For your new and used car purchasing needs. If you mention From the Hawkeye of the Storm, you let him know that From the Hawkeye of the Storm sent you, you will get a $100 Casey's gas card with any vehicle purchase through Josue. But this is a limited time only offer. So the news of Keegan Murray being drafted by the Sacramento Kings comes at a really opportune time because earlier in the day, Cooper Koch, 4-star recruit for the class of 2024, committed to the Hawkeyes, a legacy recruit. We know his dad, JR, was a star back in the 90s under Coach Tom Davis, Gary Close, and those guys. Then we got later on in the evening, we got news that Brock Harding was committing to Iowa, which was very welcome news to my ears. A kid from Moline. We haven't talked about him on this channel very much. Kid from Moline, you could argue under-recruited, had no other Power 5 offers, was just offered by Iowa earlier this week. Brock actually just coming off a visit to Iowa City, and he gives them a pledge. So he commits and announces that today prior to the draft. And then with this news of Keegan Murray being drafted number 4, just think about the implications for a moment. Let's try to figure out where this can take the program. So Iowa, of course, critics aside, we understand the critics that bring up the fact that Iowa hasn't been to a Sweet 16 since 99. And we realize that's not all Fran McCaffery. A lot of that is Todd Licklider. A lot of that is Steve Alford. That we go into this discussion understanding that Fran McCaffery needs to get to the Sweet 16. However, he is not solely responsible for the 23-year drought. Here's what I'll say, though. Fran McCaffery has built this team back up to basically to where Tom Davis left it. Iowa, perennial NCAA tournament team, having problems getting out of that first weekend. But he has produced a team that is consistently top 25 or fringe top 25. Well, once in a great while, you're going to have years like Jordan Bohannon's sophomore year where Iowa's not very good, but that's very rare. Iowa is typically in the field or very close to being in the field, and I think they'll be close to being in the field this next year. Let's remember that Iowa was vaulting up the rankings at the end of this year, struggled in the NCAA tournament, lost to a 12 seed in Richmond, but Iowa also won the Big Ten tournament, which helps perception. So the two things that Iowa has really lacked as it relates to recruiting momentum or recruiting leverage, I should say, the two things they've lacked, 1, March success, and 2, NBA draft picks, right? Consistent NBA draft picks. Now, it's gotten better, but you think about Iowa's stars early in the Fran McCaffery area, where we're talking about Matt Gaydens, we're talking about Roy Devin Marble, we're talking about Aaron White, all right? Those guys didn't have any success at the NBA level. I mean, Devin Marble, I shouldn't say any success. He had some success with Orlando and bounced around a bit, but never anything sustained. You could say the same thing about Jared Uthoff. Had some contracts here and there, couldn't sustain play in the NBA. Up to that point in Fran's tenure, you could argue that Tyler Cook was actually the most successful NBA product. But now this past season, you've got Joe Wieskamp being drafted by the Spurs. You've got Luka Garza being drafted by the Pistons. Neither one of them first-round draft picks, but both of those guys playing in the NBA this year. Cook has been back and forth, but you expect that maybe he can carve out a niche with the Bulls. You expect that Garza can carve out a niche with the Pistons. Wieskamp can do the same. That's 3 guys in the NBA that are standard NBA guys, right? Not starters, but standard NBA guys. Now you look at what Iowa brings to the NBA this year. You've got the number 4 overall draft pick in Keegan Murray, a guy who I think is going to come in and start right away, perhaps lead Sacramento in scoring, or at least be to that point by year 2 or 3. That is some serious momentum as it relates to perception. I do think that's part of the missing pieces to the puzzle that is Iowa struggling to reel in the big names. Here's the difference between Iowa football and Iowa basketball. I've talked about this on the channel before, and you can criticize either guy if you want to. Fran has consistently went for the big guns, right? He's went after Trace Jackson Davis, a 5-star recruit. He went after Keon Brooks, a 5-star recruit. He's going after John Bowl, right? John Bowl, a 7'1", top 25 guy coming up in a future class. He's going after he goes after those big names. Just because he doesn't land them doesn't mean he doesn't try. Fardaws Aimaq in the transfer portal went after him. You could call him a 5-star recruit, right? From a transfer portal standpoint. He hasn't been able to land him. The difference is Kirk Ferentz oftentimes does not go after those big names. Now, he's going to go after Caden Proctor. He's in state. He's going to go after Xavier Wampa. He's in state. AJ Epinesa with his father, Epi Epinesa. We understand why he went after him. There's going to be those guys, those exceptions to the rule. For the most part, Kirk Ferentz focuses on developmental side of things and relies on in-state products and Midwest kids that are 2- and 3-star kids, and then develops those guys into NFL draft picks. And that's fine. There's multiple ways to skin a cat. I get that. But now that Iowa is starting to have some NBA success, you have the number 4 overall player drafted. That is going to help Fran's case. Think about what Fran's doing from a developmental standpoint, very similar to what Kirk Ferentz is doing, but now he's producing pro players, which Kirk Ferentz has done a long time. And then you pair that with the fact that Fran has shown that he is willing to go after the big fish, the 4- and 5-star guys. I would have to think that Iowa's going to reel some of these guys in at some point. I have more confidence in that than I have. And I do think, even though we as fans are disappointed by the lack of success in March Madness, I do think the fact that Iowa won the Big Ten tournament and got that spotlight on selection weekend also helps the cause. And I said that after they won that tournament. It's not just about the NCAA tournament like some people think it is. Chris Murray is going to be a draft pick next year. It's only going to help the cause. I would be interested to know if the commitments from both Cooper Koch and Brock Harding were orchestrated somewhat to be announced today, because that's a lot of positive momentum in one day to have a 4-star kid in 24 commit, to have an underrated guy in Brock Harding, but a guy that I think it was clear once he got an offer that it was likely just a matter of time before he committed. You have him commit later the same day, and then you have Keegan Murray go top 4 in the draft. That's a lot of positive momentum, and from a perception standpoint, it helps a lot. And Iowa Fran's been very active on the recruiting circuit. You've got Matt Gatens now in there. You got Courtney Eldridge, very active, aggressive recruiters. There's a lot of positive momentum with Iowa basketball, folks. I really do believe there's a lot of positive momentum with Iowa hoops. So stay tuned. I do believe that Iowa will land a major recruit in an upcoming class. And I'm not just talking about Owen Freeman or Cooper Koch. Those guys are fairly highly touted kids. I'm excited about both of them, but I do believe Iowa is going to have a better shot at landing a big fish than ever before. Certainly NIL is going to continue to be a subject, an issue. If it's not put into place, Iowa doesn't have a collective they can offer these kids. But I do think, despite that disadvantage, that Fran McCaffery, with his recent NBA draft success and the Big Ten tournament title last year, that Fran will finally be able to land one of these big fish that he's been after since he's been here at the University of Iowa. Want to thank Ascent Nutrition for sponsoring the show. Their organic coffee, if you haven't already purchased a bag of this stuff, it's clean, it's great tasting. Visit goascentnutrition.com. Use code Hawkeyes at checkout. You receive 10% off your order, and it supports this channel. Hawkeyes, the code Hawkeyes at checkout. It's goascentnutrition.com.